What's going on, guys? This is the spiritual experience. In this video, um, I'm gonna warn you right now that this is going to be controversial, and it might just piss people off because it. Let me turn this off. Hold on.
Speech off.
Because it has to do with the subject that nobody really talks about in the way that it needs to be talked about. And so what is the subject I'm talking about today? It's about the past. It's about a part of history that we all know of. A history that we call the era of World War II, of the era of Hitler and how Hitler got started. Why did Hitler get started? Why did it succeed the way it did? And why is this important? Before we get involved in this video, why am I talking about this? Why is this so important? Well, because if we don't look at the past and see what major problems happened in the past and how they happened, if we don't look at why these things happened and how they happened, we won't be able to change our own our own present systems, because a lot of the present systems are maybe not be part of the past, but are causing similar problems right now. So this is why it's important to explain this, and the reason why I'm doing this with something in the past is because we have hindsight. Hindsight is 2020, and this hindsight isn't really discussed. People take history class and they learn about World War II, but they don't really learn a whole lot. They learn like little bitty facts, and they don't learn a whole lot about how this happened and the actual like mindset almost of the reason why this happened. So why did this happen? Well, it comes from a mindset of racism, but it's more than just that, because it was something that was a very popular thing in Hitler's time, something called eugenics, which was basically what Hitler was doing, eugenics. And the thing to know about this was like other countries were doing this to a lesser degree. We, America, was doing this to a lesser degree. This is the thing to remember. This is not something. This is not something that just Hitler did. America did the same thing, and it's been ignored. Why it's been ignored, we can go into later maybe, but this is the important part to remember, that this whole thing of what Hitler is doing, what Hitler did, it all comes from eugenics. It all comes from this idea that some races are lesser beings or something like that, and treat them that way. That's eugenics. And America did the same thing to a lesser degree. And the problem here isn't just that America did this. The mindset has been there, and the mindset created this type of thinking that some races are inferior or superior, and so this mindset created eugenics, and this was considered like a type of science almost. It seemed like to me. It was definitely like a consensus from like some scientists and some famous people at the time. So this is a very prevalent problem. So here are the causes. Cause 1, World War I. You may not see this, but the treaty that ended World War I and the reparations that Germany had to pay out were so enormous that Germany went into debt. So much debt that, in fact, Hitler and others had the strength to unite, because they saw that there's something had to be done, and that's another thing too to remember is that Hitler wasn't actually doing this stuff because he thought it was wrong. He was doing it because he thought it was right, because he thought it would help his country and all this other stuff. So this is a thing to remember about pretty much any position people take. It's not because what they think is wrong or because they're evil. It's because what they think is actually right is something that needs to be done for their country. So we're going back to Hitler now. The reason why this type of thing happened is because of this. The beginning of it was started in the 1990 to 1923 era, 1919 to 1923, because Germany was in so much debt that people were frustrated with how it was going, and they couldn't, feed themselves, and they couldn't really survive because their monetary system was in inflation, and so Hitler had the chance to unite the people. It failed, and then the economy grew back, but then it failed again because of the Great Depression. So they had another sort of rallying point to go back to. So this is what I mean by there's always like a reason for why something happens. There are many reasons why something happens. This is what systems thinking is. I'm going to make another episode about that later, maybe not today, but so that's how that got started. And so that's part of why Hitler took over, because there was such a rallying cry of frustration because their situation was so bad because the government didn't know how to deal with the problem. They thought simple things like inflating their currency would actually fix the problem, but it actually made it worse. This is why simple solutions do not work. They never work. All they do is they make the problem worse, or they either make the problem worse, or they lead to some kind of destruction or violence or something. Simple solutions never work in the long run. In the short run, they may do something, but they never work in the long run. So that's one thing to remember. And so that's how Hitler got into power. That's how Hitler managed to do all the stuff that he did. And there's more. There's so much more to this. The same type of frustration with poverty and stuff like that is exactly why communism was made and why it was why it happened so often and so much back in like the 50s and 60s, because there was so much poverty in so many areas and there was frustration. And too, another thing too is that before a lot of the war started with Hitler, with World War II, a lot of people thought that Hitler had the right idea about things and he was going about things in the right way, which is, we know in hindsight, it wasn't actually true. It was not working. So this is a very important thing. It's a very, very important thing to remember, that things that may seem right or good may not always be good or right. Even they may have like some good points, but if it's too simple, if it's too simple, and there's always like a factor, but if it's too simple like that, it's not good usually. So try not to think of something as that happens as right or wrong, because that usually seems to emotionalize that thing, and you become defensive when people say that it's wrong, and that's how suffering happens. That's how wars happen. That's how violence and all these other things that people don't like happens, because people do stuff like this. And they don't do it because they're evil. They do it because they're misinformed. They're misinformed about what they're doing. They're misinformed because they think that what they're doing is right, and that people need to know that it's right, and that other people are wrong. And this demonizes people, and this causes radicalization and wars and violence, and it just keeps. It's like a circle. There's a saying that says history repeats itself. And this is why history keeps repeating itself. This is why wars and violence and all this stuff keeps happening, because people keep doing this. And it's not necessarily their fault. They're just misinformed, and they don't have the knowledge to really go and see this. This is why it's a good idea to have a government. This is what I mean by when you change something. You have to change things from the inside. That is, you have to change how people see the world. You have to show them that this way isn't working and give them examples. That may not even work, but doing things from the outside isn't working either. It's repeating the same problems. So I know this video was a bit rambly, but I'll see you in the next one. Like, share, and subscribe. Hope it didn't piss you off too much. So this is a